Hello. Welcome to another episode of Spiritual Slang with your host, me, Chanel. But as you can tell, we're in my living room again because we're having another solo, comfy couch episode to talk about some things that I've been going through. Not things. One main thing that I've had to kind of relearn and everything like that. Just as you go into new seasons. But before I even go into that, because I'm getting ahead of myself, for anyone who doesn't know or is new here, I'm Chanel, the host of Spiritual Slang. This is my baby. And I created Spiritual Slang just to help people who look like me, not on the outside, but on the inside. And so what that means is just help people who have gone through the same things that I've gone through or are currently going through the things that I've gone through or the same things that I'm going through right now. And it's just a space to kind of bring light to dark areas and also just to remind you that there is a light at the end of every dark tunnel, because this podcast is truly a light at the end of so many dark tunnels for me. And I always say that because it's factual, but also because it continues to be a light, because as I go through things, then I talk about them and then it blesses other people. And so this is just a safe space to tell you that you're not alone, to show you that there's other people going through the same things. And if they can get through it, then so can you. So yeah, that's what Spiritual Slang is about. And so let's get into today's episode. So basically what I wanted to talk about today is a topic that I've had to, like I said, learn consistently and continue to learn or relearn in new seasons of my life. And it's something that I've currently been dealing with. And I feel like I had a breakthrough moment on it a couple days ago. And that's when I was like, okay, that's definitely something I can talk about on the podcast, because now that I've gone through it, I can speak about it and kind of talk about how I've been able to do it and then what's helped me. And that's just in true fashion of anything I talk about on this podcast, which is basically anything I go through, anything I talk about, I go through it first and then I kind of just talk about it on here, so that that I've been there too. But yeah, so today's episode topic is balance. We're talking about balancing all the things in your life that you have to do, all the things in your life that you've been blessed with or have to show up for, And when I was saying I've had to relearn balance in every season of my life, it's because in new seasons, when you enter into new seasons, sometimes you'll have more responsibilities, sometimes you'll have more blessings or more people come into your life. And so it's finding a way to balance all of those new things that you have, and it looks different in every season that you have, just because like I said, some seasons it's more things and other seasons it's less. But no matter what, I feel like in order to really prosper in life and show up for the things that I've been blessed with, I need to have balance in my life. And that's something, like I said, is something that I have been dealing with, because recently where I'm at transparently is I feel like I've been blessed with a lot of things and given responsibility over a lot of things, and been given things to steward over. And so I've been having to kind of refine my balance. There was a couple months ago where I was feeling like I was on everything and I was balanced and I was flowing through everything and every day, and it was crazy because people would ask me how are you so balanced, and I'd just be like, I don't know, it's the Lord, he's doing it. And he was, and he still is. Let me not say he was, he still is. But a couple months ago, I had done the work to kind of make sure I was being intentional about my God time. And then through that, I was able to find balance through the rest of the things I was doing. And the balance was flowing to the point where I even had extra time to rest, which was crazy because I was how could I do a podcast, do my full-time job, post content, and then still have time to rest? And it's just because when you're balanced and moving in a flow of life, you're able to check off all the boxes that you have to, in a way where you're surprised too. But then new things came into my life, and more priorities came into my life, and new endeavors and stuff. And then I've been in a space of having to refine my balance, which has kind of been difficult because when you're not balanced, you don't flow properly. I mean, it's like kind of what I've been saying, but like when you're not balanced, like you can feel it. I can feel it when I don't feel balanced in the areas of my life. I feel like I'm like chasing after the day. I feel like I'm drowning, trying to like survive or like doggy pedal. Doggy pedal my way up above the water, and I just feel like I never have time for anything. And being in imbalance, like it's not sustainable, like it catches up to you. And if you feel like you never have time for all the things that you have to do, you definitely don't have time to rest. And when you're not resting or taking a break, like it catches up to you. It's not sustainable, like I said. And so you're constantly just running, trying to get things done instead of just, and I feel like the day's taking you over instead of you controlling the day in a sense. And I someone that needs balance. Like I need to operate in balance or I feel it. And when I feel off, it affects every other aspect of my life. And so when I'm not balanced, that leads to me not being able to have time for anything. And that includes like myself or rest or the things I have to do. And then it also then translates into me not showing up into the spaces that I've been blessed to steward or blessed to be, or in the relationships or friendships that I have, like to my full capability. And so I'm showing up like tired or just irritated or moody or not creative or not strategic or not without any vision. And so I'm not able to really like steward the things that I have properly or take care of the things that I have properly. So yeah, balance is a huge thing for me. But like I said, I had breakthrough like a couple days ago, and then I was like, all right, great God. Now we're going to talk about it. So let's talk about it. Let's talk all things balance from my perspective and like how I've been able to like refine balance and what's helped me along the way. The first thing I'll say about finding balance really requires you to know where your strength comes from. And for me, that is the Lord. My strength 100% comes from the Lord. I know that everything that I have, every person in my life, every relationship, the job I have, this podcast, this platform, like everything I have comes from the Lord. And so if everything I have comes from the Lord, then I have to go to Him in order to find wisdom, strategy, creativity on how to steward over those things, take care of the things that He's given me, as well as how to balance those things, because like God won't bring us into new levels, into new places with more responsibility and just leave us there to like fend for ourselves. He's gonna show us how to navigate that into our lives. And He's going to show us how to take care of those things properly, right? Like He's going to show us how those fit into our current routine or like show us a new routine. And so that's like one thing I have to do is like recognize where my strength comes from and who it comes from. And that's the Lord. But the funny thing is that like it's easier said than done, because once you get a bunch of things thrown on your plate, a bunch of new like things in your life, or you, for instance, like take a new job, and so you have way more responsibility, or you get in a relationship, and so now you have to kind of take the time to take care of that relationship and make sure you're spending the right amount of time with them and make sure they feel loved and cared for. Like once you get these new things, you start to feel like you don't have time for anything else. And unfortunately, in my experience, I found that my relationship with God sometimes will suffer, or my time with God would suffer. Not my relationship with God. I always feel the Lord, but my time with Him would suffer. And so as I'm trying to like now incorporate all the things, like take care of all the things that I have, like my full-time job and my podcast and people in my life, like I found that my time with God has gotten shorter and shorter. And then now my time with God is suffering, and I'm not able to really get the strategy and the vision and the creativity I need in order to be the best I can be in all the other areas of my life, because I'm not spending intentional time with the Lord. So that was like one thing I had to correct, because I was kind of just like spending 5 minutes here or 1 minute there, but I felt like I was doing it just to kind of check off a box of like, okay, I read my scripture, or okay, I read the Bible, instead of doing it because I'm here, Lord, in this space to hear from you, or to hear what you want me to know, or for you to tell me like how you want me to take on the day, for you to tell me how you want me to take on this new thing that you've given me, how you want me to take care of it. Like being intentional with him, I was just doing it. I was just checking off a box is where I had gotten. And that wasn't getting me anywhere, because more often than not, I was telling God what I needed, or just like praying to him, just to pray to him, or like telling him what I needed, or asking him for things, but not allowing him the space to then speak back to me. And I think that's something we actually have to remember to that point, because that wasn't even something I had written down, but that's the Lord, is we can't always go to the Lord and just ask him for things and not give him the space for him to speak back to us about those things, And so sometimes in my experience, like what I would do is I would go pray, and it'd be like a 5-minute prayer, read a scripture real quick, and then I'd be done and I could go on with my day. But I felt like I wasn't really getting what I needed, like I wasn't getting the peace that I needed. I wasn't getting the confirmation that I needed, the affirmation that I needed. And that's because I wasn't giving God the time for him to speak back to me. And he reminded me of that, where it was like, you don't allow me to speak back to you about the things that you're even asking. And that's why you don't feel like that's why you don't feel like you're getting anything. And so we can't go to God all the time and just be like, give me, or just here's all that I'm laying it out and then gotta go like figure out the rest of my day. It's like, no, it's like spend time to sit with him. And even if you don't have anything to say to the Lord, like he will speak to you if he just knows you're setting that intentional time aside. What that looked like for me too, in this new season, was finding another way to encounter the Lord. And what I started to do was wake up with the Lord. And so I started to have God mornings, where I would set my alarm to wake up earlier than the time that I need to get dressed for work. And I would just worship, put on some worship music. And sometimes I was like kind of still waking up until the worship music would kind of wake me up a little bit. Put on some worship music, pray, and then journal to him. I would read a scripture and journal. And I would read the scripture and just like try to understand what God was telling me about it. And then I would just journal about all that I was feeling and just everything that was on my mind and everything that I needed from the Lord. But then I also would just sit and allow him to like talk to me, and I would journal what he was writing to me too, because I found that like, even if I didn't have anything to say, like if I just sat there with my pen on the notebook, God would know that I was waiting for him. He would know that I was expecting him to show up, and he always would. And so I would just write things that he was saying to me, and I would feel so much peace and so much like more like energy to take on the day. And so that's one way that I like kind of was like, okay, if I have all these things to do throughout the day, let me get God time. Let me have my God time in the morning. Let me make sure I'm meeting with God first, so that I now have strategy on how to take on everything else that I have to do for the rest of the day, instead of like pushing off God time to later in the day. And then it's like, as your day gets busier and busier, one thing has to give, and sometimes your God time won't give. And so I was like, you know what, let me make it a priority for the morning. I'm gonna do it in the morning. And every time I did that, like I felt like I was able to conquer the day and just flow through the day in a way where I got everything that I needed to get done. And if there was something I didn't get done, then God gave me peace to know that it was okay to like push off to the next day or later in the week. So yeah, intentional time with God is so important for balancing. And it's the only way that I find that I can show up as the best version of myself if I seek him first. I can only show up as the best version of myself in everything he's called me to if I seek him first. And I'll just kind of give an example about like this podcast, because it was like the breakthrough that I had a couple days ago, which was related to the podcast, which was like, I never want to come on here and pour from like an empty cup. I never want to come on here and pour from my own mind, from my own thoughts. Like I always want to feel God in it, And I was trying to balance everything in my life over the past week, that I was like, what am I going to talk about on Spiritual Slang? Like I didn't really know. Or I kind of had like an idea of the topic, which is the one I'm talking about, but I hadn't gotten like the rest of the meat of the topic, And a lot of times I'll have a topic and then I will kind of just sit on it for a couple of days to make sure if I feel peace in my spirit about it. And then God will talk to me about it. But I hadn't gotten like the meat of it. And so I was kind of like getting nervous or kind of a little bit frustrated just with everything and being like, what am I going to talk about? What am I going to talk about? And I remember the other day, I set some time aside with the Lord in the morning, and I sat with him for like 2 hours or almost 2 hours. And I kind of was in the space of, I am not leaving this time with you, Lord, until I feel you and until you show up, because there are things that I need. And it's like, I cannot come on this podcast and talk about anything if it doesn't come from you. And so I spent that time with him, and I felt so much things pour out of me about this topic, and also so much learnings that he was teaching me about it. And he was teaching me about how to like balance and teaching me about what I needed to do and what I needed to prioritize. And then also that was giving me like the content for this episode. And he also reminded me of the scripture from John 15:4, where it says, and I don't want to misquote it, so let me find it. Yeah, so it says, "Remain in me as I also remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me." And this just like reminded me that like we can't do anything without the Lord. You know, like everything that I have, everything that I am is a result of God. And so if I even try to do this podcast without the Lord, I'm not going to succeed. It's not going to impact people because I'm doing it by myself, you know? And it's like, I don't ever want to be in a space where I'm doing something without him. And so he just reminded me of that, because I was kind of just trying to do things out of my own strength. And God was like, you need to come to me, you know, you need to seek me first, and then I'll give you what you need in order to do whatever you have to do. And he did. Like when I set that time aside for him and I spent almost 2 hours with him, like he gave me so much more than just what I was looking for. And so, yeah, like God time is so important for being balanced in life. Like he's your strength. He's your creativity. He's your patience. He's your strategy. He has the vision. He knows the plans for your life. Like everything you need is in him. But if you don't seek him, then you won't get it and you won't know how to balance everything. God isn't exempt from anything, you know? And so when I say that God time is intentional for you to be able to balance all the things in your life, I mean for everything in your life, like every relationship, every job, any passion project, any responsibility. Like God isn't exempt from anything. He's in it all, you know, and he'll show you how to navigate that relationship. He'll show you how to navigate that job. He'll show you what you need to know for that passion project or what you need to do for it, you know. And so when I say that God time is intentional for you to be able to balance all the things in your life, I mean for everything in your life, like every relationship, every job, any passion project, any responsibility. Like God isn't exempt from anything. He's in it all, you know, and he'll show you how to navigate that relationship. He'll show you how to navigate that job. He'll show you what you need to know for that passion project or what you need to do for it. Like he has it all in him, and he's not exempt from anything, you know, and nothing's too small for him either. You know, I feel like sometimes I won't even, like sometimes if I'm trying to be like consistent in something as small as like working out or something like that, like I won't want to come to God and bother him with something so small, but God's in the small things too, you know, and he knows how to help us be consistent. He'll give us the wisdom on how to do that, or the knowledge of like what we need to do in order to make us better at consistent, or he'll show us like what's blocking us from being consistent, you know. And so God is in all things. He isn't exempt from from anything, and he's not just in the big things, he's in the small things. And so he wants to hear what you need help with or what you need help balancing, and he will give you like the answers for it. So I just wanted to pop that in there because yeah, we got to let him in everything, you know. In finding balance, it's also important to know yourself, know what you need, and then finding the time and discipline to be able to prioritize what you need. And so for me, I'm the type of person that needs rest and it needs me time, and I think when we're imbalanced in life and we're running out the day, or we're drowning in all the responsibilities we have, or we don't feel like we're in a flow, we constantly feel like we're just trying to catch up or run after things. The last thing you're doing is resting or things for yourself that is me time. And that's something that I give up when I'm imbalanced. Like, something has to give when you're imbalanced. You're not balancing everything. So you don't have that extra time to rest. You don't have that extra time to do that thing that brings you joy. And so a lot of times what we'll give is that rest, that me time. And like I said before, like God time. But when I give up the rest and the me time, because it's something that I need as a person, I can feel it in my mood. I can feel it in my attitude. I can feel it in the way I speak to people and the way I show up in places. I could also feel it in the way I perform in like my job or on this podcast or however, because I'm not feeling like I'm filled up, or I'm not feeling like as creative or as at peace or whatever. And so I'm just like trying to keep up with everything, And so prioritizing yourself and what you need is so important for being balanced. And that sometimes can look like saying no to things that you want to say yes to, or saying, developing a stronger no to the things that are going to take away your peace or take away your balance. And so what I mean by that is, like, I've had to kind of say no to things that I wanted to do on like a Saturday because I knew that I had to set that time aside to just rest. And it's hard when it's sunny outside or it's a nice day or whatever, and you want to be active and everything like that. And sometimes your rest could look like that, but there's some times where I know my rest looks like me laying on the couch watching Netflix. And if I don't set that time aside and I just keep going into the weekend, it's just gonna hurt me even more the next week. So I've had to say no to doing things that kind of sounded fun because I needed to prioritize the rest time I had at home, or just watching a show doing nothing, And the other thing I mentioned was the me time, because I'm someone that thrives with being alone. I guess I'm technically an introvert where I get filled up by myself. And so if I haven't been alone in a long time, then it's noticeable. And sometimes I don't notice it right away because it's not like me hanging out with friends or a person is not fun to me, because it is. And I'm not thinking about oh, I wish I was by myself or anything like that. But it's subconsciously I'll start to feel it when I've gone too many days with not doing something for me time, for me, And so I've had to prioritize just cleaning my apartment, spending the day by myself and cleaning my apartment. That's helpful for me to kind of get my mind straight and feel like I have things in order, or just refill by myself, or that could look like reading a book or doing something that brings you joy. My friend once told me something that someone told her, which was basically if you don't do one thing that brings you joy every day, then you're doing a disservice to yourself. And that really hits, because I feel like we can feel imbalanced, especially when we feel like we're giving. So if you just think about it, if you're working a job and then you're doing a passion project and then you're in a relationship and then you also have a social life, you're constantly giving to the job, you're giving to that passion project, you're giving to that relationship, you're giving to that to those friendships, and then you're not giving anything to yourself if you're not prioritizing yourself. And so you'll start to feel imbalance from the mere fact that you feel like you're constantly giving to everything else in your life, but you're never giving back to yourself. And in order to feel balanced, the main term of balance is I don't know the main definition, but when I imagine balance, it's okay, I'm giving something to everything in my life, including myself. And so that's why it's so important to prioritize what you need in order to feel balanced, and that can look like something different for everyone. But for me, it looks like rest and me time. And that way I feel like I'm not only giving to all the areas of my life, but I'm also giving back to myself. Prioritizing yourself will also allow you to show up better in the relationship that you have, in the friendships that you have, in your job, in every other area of your life when you also prioritize yourself. Like, it might seem like selfish or something, which I don't think it is at all. I think everyone should prioritize themselves in order so that they're taking care of themselves. It's a form of self-care, actually. Like, prioritizing yourself is a form of self-care. And so when you take care of yourself, then you're able to take care of others, But if you're not taking care of yourself, then how are you going to be able to pour into others, or show up how you want to, And I also actually had a friend who taught me a little bit about self-boundaries, because you will have to like create boundaries for yourself as well when you are trying to find balance, because we always want to do everything, right? Like, FOMO is a thing. I've struggled with FOMO. Like, I've always been like, yes to things because I don't want to miss out on them, but I also like want to do them, and I like having fun and going out and being adventurous and all those. But when you're trying to find balance, you're gonna have to develop a no, and sometimes the no is to yourself. Saying no to yourself, saying no, like I said, to the things that you want to say yes to. And my friend kind of taught me about this, about like creating boundaries for yourself. She had told me how she was prioritizing her peace and herself by not always saying yes to every friend trip that was coming up, or at least like taking the time to assess whether or not she should do it instead of just saying yes right away, because she didn't want anything to take her peace. And so if she felt like she was going to be traveling so many times a week or so many times a month, like, she might have to say no to one of the trips in order for her to feel peace and probably still feel balanced in her life. And that really hit me, because I've been someone who would want to say yes to everything, like I said, because I've had FOMO. And sometimes when people would ask me things, I wouldn't take the time to just like think about it or pray about it or see how that fits into my life. Instead, I would just say yes right away. And so I've had to kind of develop this demeanor where instead of saying yes right away, say, okay, let me think about it. I'm gonna pray about it. I know sometimes that means no when you say I'm gonna pray about it, but I've had to kind of just be like, let me think about it. Let me pray about it. And then I'll kind of sit on it and then come back to them with like my answer. There's no harm in just being like, I need to think about it for a second. That way you don't feel regret for giving someone an answer right away before you even knew if you could take it on. And so that's something that I've been doing, which is kind of just being like, okay, like, let me think about it and see if I can do it. That way I can kind of see all the other priorities I have in my life and see like how this trip fits into my life, how this new project fits into my life. Like, if I'm able to do it and do it to my best of my ability, then I'll say yes. But I'll only get to that answer if I think about it and I pray about it and I sit on it to really know how I feel about it. So yeah, you might have to take your time with things when trying to find balance. Don't say yes to everything. Don't be so quick to say yes to everything, but also be okay with saying no to some things. Not everything requires your yes. You're not going to look like a bad friend. You're not going to look like a bad person if you just say, no, I can't do it. Like, in this time of my life, the reality is we can't do everything. And that's like a reality check for me, especially because I'm someone that likes to think I can get a lot of things done and do a lot of things, which if I put my mind to it, I probably could. But at what cost would that be? At the cost of my peace, at the cost of my balance. And if it's going to take me off track from my balance or being able to like balance all the things that I have in my life right now, then it's probably not worth it, So yeah, that is another way that I've found balance. And it's brought me more peace, honestly, to feel like I'm taking my time with making decisions, because I don't feel like I'm feeling rushed, or I'm not thinking about it later being like, should I have said that yes? Should I have said no? Like, and then that's causing me anxiety or more stress, And so instead I'm like taking time to think about it. That way, when I give them an answer, it's coming from a space of like, I've thought about it and yeah, I can take it on and I feel peace about it. So yeah. Another thing I would say about finding balance, in finding balance, you're also going to have to be okay with letting go of old routines in new seasons. In new seasons, new things come, right? New responsibilities, new projects, new people, all of those things. And sometimes the way you used to do things isn't going to work for this new season. And especially if you have to delegate your time to so many more things. And so I talked about it earlier, but like I said that I started to wake up with God in the morning. That was something I had to develop in the new season that I'm in, because the old season that I was in, I used to have dinner with Jesus. And so I loved dinner with Jesus, which was basically I would make my dinner and then I would eat it with Jesus. And so I would open my Bible, I would open my journal, and I'd eat dinner while reading the Bible and letting him talk to me. And it felt like almost like we were kind of having a conversation, because I created that time for him to speak to me, and I was eating, and it was kind of like when you have dinner with a friend. That's what it felt like. But when I entered into a new season where I got busier and then more people came into my life that I had to kind of prioritize, and then I was still doing my podcast and I have a full-time job and a social life, I found that like I couldn't keep up with dinner with Jesus anymore, because I had so many other things in my life going on, as well as like trying to eat healthy and work out. I mean, like we have so many things, but I found that I couldn't keep up with it. And so I had to just find a way to meet with God a different way. And that's when I started to do mornings. And that is like critical too, because God moves. And so it's important for us to move with him, you know? And the way we do that is like asking him, like, God, what does our relationship look like in this new season? What does it look like for me to show up in this new season, you know, with you, show up with you, but also show up with the relationship I have, with the friends I have, with the job that I have. Like, ask God that, you know, and it's going to look different in different seasons, because like I said, like we have different things that come up and we need to change our routine. So we can't be tied to doing things the old way in new seasons, because it won't work, you know, and you'll try, but it just won't feel right. And so being able to adapt to your environments, essentially, like being able to adapt to the seasons that come into your life, are going to be critical for you in order to find balance. So yeah, like having intentional time with God is important for balance, like knowing where your strength comes from. And for me, that's the Lord. And so spending intentional time with him is so important for me to feel balanced. Another thing is knowing yourself and knowing what you need, and then making that a priority. If you're trying to balance all the things in your life that have been given to you, but you're not incorporating your own self needs, then you're not going to be balanced. Like, taking care of ourselves is just as important as taking care of everything that God has given us. And so finding that balance and incorporating what you need and making it a priority is important for balance. And then saying no, being able to say no, and also not being so quick to say yes, allowing yourself the time and the space to think about how something new, like a new project, a new opportunity, would fit into your current routine of balance, so that you know whether or not like you should say yes to it. And even sometimes that's like a social activity, like as simple as, can I go on a weekend trip when I know that I've been traveling or been busy the entire week or whatever, and I need time to just rest. And so not being so quick to say yes, but also knowing when to say no. And then as I just mentioned, which was, don't be so tied to your old routine in new seasons. New seasons call for new routines. New seasons call for new ways of doing things. And that new way can look like the way you show up with God, the way you show up in your relationship, in your friendships, at your job. Like, all of those things you might need to think about like a new way for those. And yeah, those are like the main things that have kind of like helped me to find balance. And everything is easier said than done, of course, because it takes work. Finding balance in your life takes work. It takes intentionality, and it takes sacrifice. Like, if we aren't intentional about balance, then we're just going to be running after the day, you know, because we're not thinking about like, am I spending time with myself? Am I spending the right amount of time with God? All we're thinking about is, how can I get this done, this done, this done, and this done? And so it takes work to be like, okay, let me lay out everything I have to do, everything that's a responsibility to me, and let me figure out how I can make it all work and flow in a way that I feel balanced, but also I feel peace. So that takes work and it takes intentionality, as I said. And then it also just takes sacrifice. You have to sacrifice times you want to go out. You have to sacrifice your time in general. Like waking up with God isn't easy. And sometimes I get a little bit less sleep than I want to because I need to spend time with God. And so it takes sacrifice. But I feel like a balanced life is better than an imbalanced life. Like you will find that when you are balanced, you have way more time for the things that you have to do than you actually like thought you had when you were imbalanced. Like you have more space to do more things because you're operating in a flow that's just flowing. All in all, though, I will say, like, you have to value your balance if you want to work at it, be intentional about it, and sacrifice for it. Like, you have to value it. And when you value balance, I feel like with balance comes peace. And you're not, and you just feel like you're on your A game. Okay. But yeah, so that is a wrap on this cute little comfy balance episode. I hope it helped you in any way, shape, or form. It is something that like you constantly have to relearn in new seasons. Like I said, like balance doesn't look the same in every season. And it's something you have to relearn and you have to redo, but it's worth it in order for you to have peace. And it's something that I'm constantly striving for. I'm constantly trying to do and trying to work at, because it's the way that I know to feel the most peace, to move in the best flow that I can. And so yeah, I'm constantly working at it. But if you work at it, you'll find it. So yeah, that is a wrap on this episode. Thanks for joining me for another comfy couch combo. Okay, so I want to end this episode the way I end every episode. So first thing I'll say is invite God into everything. The big things and the small things. Like nothing is too small for him. Nothing is too big for him. He wants to hear from you. And so invite him into those things and allow him just to move in those areas. Allow him to be what you need in those areas, to give you the answers that you need in those areas. Something as small as working out or eating healthier to something as big as like a house or a new job or a relationship. Like invite him into everything. Like he's our Lord for a reason. Like he knows the beginning and the end. He knows our plans. He knows what we need, when we need it, who we need to be on our life. And like when we go to him and when we seek him, we find all the answers we need. And if even if he doesn't give us an answer, he gives us the peace to not need the answer, And so invite him into everything. The other thing I will say is prioritize your peace. Peace is so important. In order for us to just show up as the best version of ourselves in every area that God has called us to. So prioritize your peace. And with balance comes peace. And the last thing I'll say is stay prayed up. Prayer is where it's at. Okay. Bye.